Welcome to this week's Renaissance Man. I am honored to be joined by one of the best marketing geniuses in entertainment, also an amazing motivational speaker. Gary V, my guy, welcome to the program.
I'm humbled, Jalen. It's great to see you. I love seeing you shine. I'm busy these days, so I'm not saying yes to much, but I saw this come across. I didn't even finish reading the email. I just replied, yes, I'm happy to be here. Thrilled to see my man Corey on the ones and twos behind the scenes, and I'm ready to go.
That's love. That's love. But for those that don't know, you first got famous for once being known as the wine guy. Red is my favorite, by the way. And it's chronicled that you got started working in your father's wine and alcohol business. So as a father now, how do you prepare your children to go into the workforce?
You know, it's funny. I have an 11-year-old daughter who's the reverse of me. I was a terrible student. She's going to go down in history. She's getting 105s and 104s. And it's crazy for me, Jalen, because I'm D's and F's by 6th grade, which is what she's in now. And I just smile. So, and then I have an 8-year-old guy, Xander, and he might be a little bit more like his dad. I haven't figured it out yet, but he might have a little bit more of that entrepreneurial hustle. I took him to a sports card show 2 years ago. He was 6 and he was flinging it. So I was like, okay, he's got that street thing. And, you know, the reality is it's listening. You know, to me, preparing them for life is around self-esteem and self-awareness, right? You know, when you have a daughter, you want to make sure that she doesn't wrap her entire life into what society wants to push down, right? Your looks and all this, you know, I want to make sure that they're open. I'm an entrepreneur, but they don't need to be, right? I don't need them to be, you know, like daddy. And I'm really out there, right? Like, I'm sure you think about this as well. And anybody who's got any kind of like heat on them, you get older, you start thinking about how that impacts your children, like that pressure that, you know, a lot of us didn't have to come up with. Nobody knew who my parents were. And so I got to be who I was as a man. If my son's an entrepreneur, that's going to be challenging. You know, me at 16, if my dad was this kind of entrepreneur and out there like that, that's a whole different dynamic that I didn't have to deal with. So I'm going to be empathetic. I'm going to be compassionate. I want to do for them what my parents did for me, which is put me in the best position to succeed in what I'm about. So if it's for the workforce, I'm going to teach them how to interact with human beings and have compassion, empathy, and things of that nature. If it's you know, meant to be entrepreneurship or something else, then, you know, obviously I got a whole lot to tell them. But I want them to love their game as much as I love mine, right? These kids are going to grow up with wealth. I didn't. Maybe my daughter wants to build a nonprofit because she's going to give away her parents' money. Fine. You know, like, I just want them to be happy. I really mean that. I think a lot of parents fuck it up and have dreams for their kids based on their dreams. My kids are still young. I'm watching. You and I at 11 and 8 already had a sense of what our destinies were. You know, that's where entrepreneurs and athletes really collide. You know, there was no confusion for me when I was 11. At that point, I knew I wasn't going to play for the Jets, but I thought I was going to buy them. You know, and so I think that my kids and most kids actually don't have that. They don't know at 8 and 11 where it's all going to wrap up and be. So I want to be compassionate, patient, empathetic, but most of all, not the cliche mistake that most people make, which is I don't have wants for them other than for them to enjoy what they do the way that I do it. And whether that makes $40,000 a year, good. Whether that's to change the world, good. Whether that's to be a teacher, a cop, a politician, all the things that are not like entrepreneurs, good. Just as long as they love it the way I have from day one.
This weekly opportunity with the New York Post excited me because not only do I get a chance to do a podcast with people that are really talented and successful like yourself, but also to write a column, actually articulate what makes you tick. And for those that don't know, you're also a really accomplished author. And your first book, Crush It, did just that. So can you acknowledge some of the lessons that the people can get from checking out a couple of your books?
So for everybody listening, you know, I don't need you to spend $13. Hit me up on Twitter at Gary VE. I'll do some surprise and send some out. I'm sure it's on some pirated websites and you can get it for $0. If you read Crush It, which I wrote in 2008, it came out in 2009. it's scary, even for me, and I believe in myself like nobody's business, right? I do not lack confidence and belief, but it's scary 13 years later to think about how much all of that ended up being true. You know, Jalen, you and I have a special piece in our hearts for each other because Andy Elkins, CAA, you know, I was talking mad game in 2009 to them when they signed me for the wine stuff, but I was like, no, I'm a businessman. They're like, no, just go do the Food Network. I'm like, nah, I'm going to be this guy. And I said something like, let me prove it to you on somebody who's not me. And obviously we got to work together to stand up your Twitter to that next level. So you really know, you know, people have been put on to me a little bit more in the last 3-4 years. You and I go way, way back. You already know that I really knew then, like really knew then. And so now the whole world's like that. And so, you know, yeah, that book for me is something I'm proud of. You know, it's funny. I've come to realize, much like all the rappers I love, your first album's always a beast if you've got it, because you had your whole life to write it. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And so I think that's what Crush It is. When I read it, like somebody's been people have been hitting me up lately. I don't know if it's just the timing or if the creator influencer thing is just so obvious to the whole world now. But yeah, I believe that people could build businesses around what they loved and around being themselves. And that's become very real. And a lot of those things ring true. And a lot of people, you go read the Amazon reviews, people are like, this is full of shit. This isn't going to happen. I enjoy those reviews 13 years later, you know, like, it happened, it's real, and it's just starting, to be honest.
And how about the fact that having you on and I get a chance to create a theme, you'll appreciate this one. Because the theme for this week's episode is if opportunity doesn't knock, build a door. Because a lot of people are going through a hard time, Gary, with COVID-19. What are some of the areas that you feel listeners to take advantage or build for themselves during this very difficult time?
You know, Jalen, I'm going to go back a little bit to your childhood. And I obviously, because I'm a fan, know a little something, but obviously not 99% of it, like the real world always plays out. I always tell people who've got a little juice, like nobody knows you. You know, like they don't really know, but they know subtle things. And so you grew up in an environment where as a child, it's impossible that this isn't the case. You had people in those circumstances spend all their time dwelling and complaining about the system, right? And they used it as their excuse to not put in the work. They were right. Like, let there be no confusion. There is systematic racism. There is f***ed up shit. But, by the way, I would rather be you. This is real talk now. You, Jalen, than my son. Here's why. You had the luxury of coming up and building your own thing, right? On your craft. My son, if he goes out and dominates as an entrepreneur his whole life, everyone's going to say that Gary Vee did it for him. Your dad put you on 3rd and a half base. I'd be dead if that happened to me. You see where I'm going? So what's my answer? You can't control COVID. You can't control if the government's giving you a stimulus check or not. You can't control what your boss is doing. You can't control if it's going to snow. You can't control if a tree's going to fall on your car. You can't control almost everything. What you can control is what you do with it. I always say, if anybody's done it that looked like you, tell me what the complaints are. Right? Like, right? Like, I like how you reacted to that, right? You see where I'm going? Like a lot of people in your position, mine, like you go back to where you came from and you motivate the kids like I made it. And my big thing is, it's not even what the person in that situation is going to say, whether it's inner city, whether it's, by the way, Upper East Side wealthy schools, and that somebody comes from alumni who made it on Wall Street and made 80 million and those kids wanted it. Here's my thing. If somebody made it that looked like you, then it means it's possible. Doesn't mean this, like, I was born in Russia. We lived in a studio apartment in Queens. Like my dad was never around because he worked every minute. Like I gave the first 12 years of my career to my parents to build their business. So I only started really at 34, not at 22. Like now when I hear kids call me and be like, I don't want to work for my dad and mom anymore. Like, how'd you do it? I was like, I needed to give them back because I love them so much. And then I got mine. We're not athletes. We can be in our prime at 65, right? That's a big thing for entrepreneurs. So the advice I'm giving is like, look, the world deals you many things. Is today, oh God, this is crazy. So today's actually the day of the recording. Obviously you'll distribute this later. Today is the 1-year anniversary of one of the great losses in the culture, in our society, in Kobe Bryant, right? I, somewhere around May or June, when people were really struggling with COVID, would tell some of my friends, business friends, associates, I was like, look, if COVID started 2 months earlier, Kobe'd be alive for the next 40 years. Do you understand that you're deciding to be pessimistic? Because I could say to you, did you know that COVID saved your life? Because if you didn't go, because you've been in your house, you didn't go on the highway, and this was the day that you were destined to get hit by a truck. I have a business associate whose wife had to go get COVID checked because they were taking their kid to college and they saw something weird and they caught a very deadly cancer early, and it's dramatically more likely that it saved her life. No COVID, gone, right? Like, look what happened in basketball culture, like Karis LeVert, right? He doesn't get traded, right?
He would not have known about his injury.
Right, and somebody might say when they heard that, oh, poor Karis LeVert, right? He was there, and now he's gonna miss out on the flex for Brooklyn. Meanwhile, it saved his life potentially. I don't know all the details, but I'm seeing the headlines. So I'm just saying, why can't you be optimistic? Like, why? Why are you not allowed? What am I saying to everybody? Be practical. I'm not saying be delusional, like I'm gonna win the Mega Millions or it's gonna be all right because God said so. And that's good too. I believe in faith. But I'm just saying, you could do something about it. You could sit on LinkedIn for 4 hours tonight and message people and be like, I'm hungry. And 1 out of 800 people says, come and intern for me. Like, you could. But a lot of my friends would rather sit and play 2K, smoke a blunt, and complain.
See, a lot of times what also happens is it becomes not only systematic oppression, but it becomes generational.
Oh, that's such a good point.
And it suppresses you psychologically and emotionally as well.
When you're a parent, when your environment, yep.
So for example, it's like going to a sporting event. And I've used this example before. And you look up at the score and it's 400 years of slavery to 0. It's the first quarter. You know you're not going to win the game. So you walk into the huddle and you tell your team you got to play hard. You got to play with pride. And here's the term. You got to fight for field position.
It's such an incredibly powerful point, right? You know, the reality is, to your point, and obviously, thank God, America, you know, the only way to fix things is to look them in the mirror, right? And when I say thank God, this is such a big issue. Like, it is like, people have to understand, every company starts with the CEO. Every building starts with the foundation. Slavery is in the history of America. In Europe, the reason my grandfathers both spent 10 years in jail was because they were Jewish, and that was the black of Europe, right? Other parts of the world, indigenous people in Australia, it's everywhere. The interesting thing that I think a lot about is, do you let the weight of that go on your shoulders? You know, and then there's much smaller issues, like the person that got let go during COVID because the company couldn't afford to pay them. Or, Jalen, what about the person that built an incredible restaurant business and is just dead? Like, it's not their fault. Like, it was COVID, it affected people differently. Or a gym. There's so many stories of things. Or you're a white man and everything's super, quote unquote, systematically better for you, but your wife dies from cancer and now you have 3 kids under 3 and you're by yourself. Life is complicated. Life is messy. So for me, when you ask me, what do I say to people? I go macro, because I know there's a lot of different people listening, right? There's a lot of different things that everyone's dealing with. By the way, I think mental instability, or the reverse, mental peace, no matter who you look like, is the greatest privilege. If you've got your mind right, black, green, and different, girl, boy, alien, like, you're winning if you've got that.
You know what makes you a lot of times have your mind right? When your money is right.
Or when your process of chasing something's right.
Correct.
You know, it's funny.
It's hard to do that chase because that patience really takes a long time. It takes years.
Patience is I talk about it all the time. People get mad at me. Comedians spoof me on TikTok and say, like, a 90-year-old comes up to you, Gary V, and he says, you got time. But I believe in patience because I think it's an undertone to practicality around optimism. I think it matters. Life's a mindset game. You see what you're looking for, right? If you want to find darkness, good news. Go on Twitter, you'll find it. But here's the reverse that's not being talked about right now. You want to see beautifulness? Go on Twitter and you'll find it. And I think the thing that people don't realize is, this is why I think about parenting a lot. My father, and may my grandmother rest in peace, and I knew her very well, she was an uncomfortably negative person. Of course my father is negative. Of course my father's the anti-Gary V and says no to everything instead of yes. And he grew up in communism. Everybody went to jail and suppressed and like, of course. So I don't judge, I'm actually empathetic. You know, the world needs more compassion. It's not just thinking, you know, it's understanding like, of course, you know, lives matter. I laugh at that one, right? Yes, of course, but can you have 5 minutes of compassion for somebody else? Everyone's too selfish of their own pain.
Correct.
All you're seeing is pain. Do you know how bad I feel for cops right now? I'm being dead serious. Of course there are pockets but right now, but everyone doesn't like them. The right, the left, like between the Capitol building, like, are you kidding me? Like, you know, and if you have the nicest, whether they're black, white, or indifferent, cop in your family and your uncle, and he's getting hated on both sides, that makes you sad. So like, I go very macro and very micro. Goes back to the opening question. What do I say? I say that no matter what it is. Nobody, if we could fix every problem, everybody would do it like this. What you need to do is figure out, to your point, how do you move the ball down the field? That's exactly right. For you, for the things you care about in life, and do you understand that the most selfish act you can do is by being selfless, because it will create a karma circle around you that will bring you love. It's historic. We put those people, there's a reason Gandhi and MLK are on a pedestal. It's the right model. The problem is the systems kill those people. And those are very fascinating conversations for a late night cocktail about red wine. Jalen, that's you and me in LA, hopefully up post camp at a 10 p.m. to 2 in the morning. I think for the purpose of trying to bring people value, let me say this. The internet has created more opportunity for people than ever before. You can work your 9 to 5, come home and start your podcast. Your grandmother couldn't. There was no internet. So she worked her 9 to 5 that she didn't love, but she couldn't come home and talk about cartoons or sports or food on this thing called the internet for free. TikTok is free. Instagram is free. LinkedIn is free. It's free. You don't need a fancy mic. You don't need lighting. And that's crazy. And that's what I talked about in 08. And I think we need that formula more than ever. People can make things out of their lives and nobody's the gatekeeper. That's the beauty of the internet. It doesn't know who you are.
Okay, so what about this? So what are some of the simple purchases that you've made to help you become more productive with work that you think people should consider investing in?
If you can afford it, an admin. There are people right now on the prex, like on the cusp, right? They got a small little business, and instead of spending $45,000 on a youngster to be their admin, they want to take that home and buy another handbag or take a nicer trip to Miami. What they don't realize is if they made that investment for $45,000, they'd be so much more efficient 3 hours a day that they'll make $400,000 on that $45,000. And so I see a lot of people micromanage. So that's one, like, it's funny where my brain went. When you asked me that question, I went into things like my admin, my full-time trainer, because if I'm healthy and I'm sleeping right and I'm eating right, then I've got that energy to do this stuff that I'm doing, right? I think about technology, right? Don't be cheap. Get Slack for your business or yourself. Pay that $10 a month for, an extra piece of software that might, or $100 a month. Like a lot of people that, I'm being very narrow here because we talked, I think, a little bit about workers and people on the come up. Now I'm going very narrow to what I would call small business, micro entrepreneurship. You're just kind of coming on the come up. Most of them want the money for themselves. Most people, Jalen, you know this, want to be entrepreneurs because they want to buy a boat. And I'm saying, feed your business, not yourself at first. Stay hungrier a little bit longer. The Westin is okay this time. Ritz-Carlton's coming. You see where I'm going? Because then you can make the investments, and now you're not having a $200,000 a year business, you have a $2 million business, and now you're really eating. And so I would say people, believe it or not, is one of the things that I would spend money on.
What is the number one skill Couldn't wait to get your answer to this one. That an entrepreneur should have. Number one skill.
Conviction. It's hard, bro. It's super hard to have everything on your shoulders forever. If you don't have conviction, like, and honestly, it's the reason I answered that, and would have not been my answer 8 years ago. I have lost an incredible amount of money over the last decade investing in businesses because I didn't realize how much entrepreneurship was a talent. Because this thing all blew up. You know, when I was investing in Twitter, Facebook, those things, those people were entrepreneurs. But then this all got hot. You know that in the last 15 years, everyone listening. I kept investing because I was winning Uber. I was doing my thing. But I lost a lot because at the time, 2012, 13, 14, 15, I didn't realize that it wasn't just the horse, it was the jockey. The business was right. I was like, this is going to work. But I'm like, damn, I could build that business because I got a stomach. You know, Jalen, you know, this is why I love your era of basketball. When I tell you, I love that era, call it, for me, it's 86 to 98 because I like.
Oh, that's the Bird Big Three.
You know what I liked? I liked the way that Xavier McDaniel fouled Michael Jordan. I liked it. I liked what Anthony Mason, I liked it. I liked it more than today. I love the skill set. These guys, I mean, you've got 7-footers doing step back. I mean, it's insane what the game has evolved into. But for me, I'm not saying I'm right. I'm not doing some old dog stuff and this isn't as good. It's not about right or wrong. I love getting punched in the mouth. Let me say this slow. This is a very important insight that I think can help people. I, Gary Vaynerchuk, like to get punched in the mouth. It's why I still love the Jets and the Knicks so much, but I stopped cheering for the Yankees and the Rangers because they won and I stopped caring. It's why I jumped in early on the podcast and said, or your process. It's not just about for me, the reason I think I'm going to win the whole game is I love the game more than the trophies. I loved 81 to 73. I loved it. I love the ruggedness. I love the mental aspect. I love the perseverance. Jalen, do you know how many guys, I mean, you know way better than me, but I'm going to say something that like, I can't wait. I'm going to see you maybe talk about this in 2 years and be like, yo, I think I got Jalen to think about that. Do you know how many guys would have dominated in the NBA today that folded like a cheap chair in your era and the decade before you because the physicality of the mental part of getting punched in the face, going to the rack. I mean, now, of course you're going to the rack. Like, you can't even sneeze on a guy. People were clotheslining motherfuckers out here. And I mean that. I mean it very seriously. And I don't know who, because I don't know them well enough, but there's somebody right now dropping 23 a night that would have been on the bench because he would have broke 15 years ago from that physicality and mental. These guys are homies now, which by the way, on the record, I love it. I want them scheming with each other. I think the NBA is vulnerable for the top 10 superstars to start their own league. I'm about that for them because they're the ones bleeding on the court. But on the flip side, let there be no confusion. I liked it when these guys hated each other. I like that Larry Bird and Magic were anxious before they saw each other in that Converse commercial because they hated each other.
Yes. So a few things that you said now, and it's so refreshing because you know how much I respect you and I love what you do. And we have that trait in common. I love being punched in the mouth too. My favorite team is the Detroit Lions. We've won one playoff game in 63 years. Sometimes I just wear an outfit just so people on social media can. Like today on TV, I purposely wore just a plain hair, little fro, didn't put no time and energy into it so that everybody that saw me on Christmas Day that was telling me how crisp I was, and I was.
Very crisp. I saw it. That was a meme for the day. That cut was crazy.
Brother, I need to now get those people back giving me that negative energy to motivate me.
Bro, I'm telling you right now, we never talk like this. I know. I watched you play. I went to those games. I watched. I know who you are. It's why I couldn't wait. Bro, when I tell you I love the hate, I love the hate. This is why nobody can beat me, Jalen. People think on Twitter they on me. They're like, Gary V, you're this. I'm like, I'm sitting there on some evil shit saying, you don't understand. You're feeding me. You think you're tearing me down? You're feeding me. I'm going to stick it in your mouth.
Yeah.
That's entrepreneurship. That's a premier athlete. And that's something that everybody who's listening right now has to ask themselves. And if you're not like us, you have to understand it's amazing to be a number 2 and a number 3. The mistake is to think you're a number 1 and then fail and then have self-esteem issues. What you need to figure out is if you are a Robin or heck, the Flash and Aquaman, if you're a number 5, you know how much money the number 5 made on Instagram?
How much?
More than you and I combined have made in our careers. Like hundreds and billions at this point if they didn't sell stock. So what I'm saying is self-awareness. I know it's cool to be an entrepreneur right now, but if you're not one, mazel tov. Be a number 2 operator to 1 and go to the moon. If you don't love that blood in your mouth, if you don't like that scene in a movie where the guy gets punched in the mouth and then he kind of looks up, wipes off the blood and goes, okay, now let's go. Then you're not about that entrepreneur life because when COVID comes, man, Jalen, I've been talking about this game for a long time. The amount of people that reach out to me and they're like, Gary, this is unfair. It's COVID. I'm like, no, it's entrepreneurship. Mm-hmm. You know what else is unfair? Vietnam, the Black Plague, depression, the stock market crash of the 87, somebody's mom dying, their kids dying in a fire and their business was bopping. Like life's not fair. The game's not fair. Do you have the stomach for this?
Absolutely. And you're such a terrific motivational speaker. And I have to ask you this before I get you to go in 60 seconds, because I appreciate your time. Who motivates you and why?
The number 1 person that motivates me is not a specific person, even though my mom and dad are crazy for me, straight up heroes. The person that motivates me is when I go through life and I see whether I make up the story in my mind because I'm driving and I'm in New York City and I'm at a light and I look at a 59-year-old woman carrying 3 bags and has 2 grandchildren, and I make up a story, right? Like life didn't play it out so great. And this woman has grinded, hasn't cried once, not a complaint, not a complaint. Building optimism in these are stories I play. Building optimism in these 2 kids, because back to what you said, I'm getting goosebumps now. I don't know if you can see this, like straight up goosebumps, because she's telling these kids, you're going to advance. You're going to take the ball. This woman hasn't said a word, hasn't complained, hasn't blamed the mayor, hasn't blamed the president, hasn't said a word. She just did and put it head down. And I admire that silent. To me, complaining, Jalen, is a disease. It doesn't mean it's a disease. It doesn't mean you're not right. I tell my friends all the time, like, you're right, comma, now what? Because I'll give you the affirmation that you're right, that your boss is a dick, or that got fucked up, or too bad, or it flooded in New York, the hurricane came, and that's crazy unfortunate that you stood up your business and it got blown out by a tornado. We don't hear those stories in Kansas of the guy who worked 13 years, saved all his money, set up his auto body shop and got wiped by the tornado, right? How is that fair? It's not. My question though, and this is not insensitive, this is love actually, is okay, cool, but what are we gonna do about it? Like the things I do behind the scenes for nonprofits, it's always around people who couldn't control their shit. I sit on the board of Charity Water because there are millions of people in Africa who don't have clean water. Do you understand that I can get up right now and press a button on my phone? Like, people don't get it. People don't get it. So to me, the people that inspire me are the ones who have it, who got dealt a 3 of hearts and a 7 of clubs and didn't cry and worked it and won that hand by bluffing the system.
Wow. So a few things. Wow. And that motivation, I remember being that kid with his mom telling him as we were leaving the store and I was carrying the bags, that you're going to do something special with your life.
That's it.
And never see her complain about anything, never had a cleaning person. I'm the youngest of 4 kids. She was the key puncher at Chrysler for 25 years. That life, no heat, kerosene heaters, boiling water to wash up.
Bro, your mom is, I'm telling you, on some real ass shit, your mom is such a hero to me. You don't even know. Like, I believe in that. I tell my friends a lot of, because I love sports. Let's call it what it is. A lot of athletes have, a lot don't, but a lot do. And I tell a lot of my buddies, I'm like, fuck you and all the photos you're taking, your mom, your grandmother, your dad, whoever it is, right? Your parents. Like, I really mean it. I mean it. It's what I look up to because I grew up in it. My great-grandparents immigrated to this country at 71 years old. I mean, Soviet Russia in the 60s, 70s that my parents grew up in, like 50s, 60s, like with my grandparents, makes Mississippi look like New York City. It was like, people don't get how good America is in its space against other places like that. So I'm so grateful, my guy. And honestly, guilt drives me too, Jalen. I got this like mix of gratitude and guilt. I know that if I was reversed with my grandfather, I'd be in jail for 10 years in Russia and he'd be here on the cover of magazines. I just know that. So how can't I be empathetic to that? Chance, life, my parents are alive. Like, man, I'm so about your mom and every woman and man that represents that life. There's no Elon Musk or Bezos or LeBron. And I admire all three of those guys for different reasons. Oprah came up, but still it's that person that's silent, grinder, word is bond, just like that person. You know who I'm talking about.
Exactly. Spit on your hand. That is the contract. No doubt about it. And your word is bond. But you use an example, and I got to ask.
Please.
I'm sorry, fellas. We have about 7
minutes. I see it. And I'm 5 minutes late already, so we'll do this in 2 minutes. Thank you, Court.
We got to get the gone in 60 seconds questions in.
Okay. All right, here we go. 3, 2, 1. But you made an example I got to ask. You said a 7 of clubs and a 5 of hearts. You play spades?
Ask Chris Paul's mom how good I am at spades. I rolled up to D Wade's spades party at the NBA All-Star. And of course, you know what it is. They're like, this white boy. What they don't know is I went to Mount Ida College, which is 85% black. And my life was CeeLo and spades for 4 years. And so I rolled in there and people got caught. Jalen. People were sleeping. And honestly, one of the most complimentary things that has ever happened to me, I don't want to make it up. So I don't remember what I dropped on them, but I did something to CP3 and his mom in this match. And I had a partner straight up. And real players know. So they both know that I have a partner, but they're kind of starting to build up wait a minute, does this kid know something? And I don't remember what I did, but I did something that really caught them. I took a book that shouldn't have and she turned and looked at me and again, I don't know who's listening right now, but an old school black lady.
No question.
Who looks at you and gives you daps on how you play spades. It's hard to get a bigger compliment.
So before I let you get out of here, I like to do this rapid fire segment called Gone in 60 Seconds. Let's get it. You are a diehard New York Jets fan. Besides Joe Namath, what legendary Jets player deserves a statue in front of MetLife Stadium?
Altoon, my favorite player. Smooth as ice. I just love him so much. Most underrated Jet of all time, Altoon.
Yeah, great hands. Terrific receiver. You became famous on the internet for being known as the internet wine guy, as I mentioned earlier. Give me your number one wine no.
Number one wine no. Putting ice in your wine. Mm-hmm.
I do that to make it sweet.
It's a no, bro. It's a no.
Next family vacation, you're excited to take with the family.
The National Sports Card Convention with my little guy in Chicago coming up this August. COVID, please work with me here. I need to take my little man there.
What's an article of clothing every entrepreneur should invest in?
A really fluffy, soft hoodie. So when you're on the flight, you could put it over your eyes and go to sleep.
Keep your hoodies on and your boots laced. And last but not least, and I really appreciate you for taking the time, my brother. Can't wait to catch up and play some spades and all of that. In honor of Black History Month, who was someone that you'd like to have dinner with? And what would you like to ask them?
Jalen, do you know who Howard Bingham is?
I do.
So Howard Bingham is a gentleman who is the father of one of my best friends in the world, Mount Ida alum Dustin Bingham. And Howard is, as you know, one of the true unsung heroes of the Black community in his photography of Bill Cosby and Ali and Malcolm X. We were youngsters when I got to spend time with him in college, and then everybody got busy and then unfortunately he passed away. He was on the cover of Sports Illustrated where it said, "Who's this man?" with Howard Bingham, because everybody would say that about Muhammad Ali because Howard was by his side for all those years. The fact that I had this close proximity to him, and because Dustin's one of my best friends in the world, at my wedding, I talk to him every week. I would love the chance to really chop it up with him for 3 hours on some thoughtful shit that I wasn't able to do in my 20s. That would be my answer.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time, my brother. Looking forward to catching up soon.
Thank you.